Hello, everybody, and welcome to our esports session at the Future of Gaming event. Hope you've had a great day so far. I'm here this afternoon to sit with a good friend of mine and an entrepreneur who has delved into the world of esports over the last 18 months to 2 years. It is, of course, Oliver Weingarten, who is the founder and CEO of London United. Oliver, welcome to the stage.
Hi, Jez. Thanks for having me along. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. So just to kind of set what we're going to talk about and to ensure that we entertain you, the audience, we're going to be having a look in this session at esports as an industry and as a sector. We're going to be looking at grassroots and grassroots players, the challenges that people have in trying to become a professional gamer, and also the opportunities that are there for brands to take advantage of esports. So I figured one of the best ways to start, Ollie, was around what esports actually is. There's so much talk around esports gaming that it's easy to get confused. If you had to provide our audience with I suppose a 2 to 3 minute summary of what esports is, what would you say?
I thought you were going to say a 2 or 3 word summary, and actually I've got it down to 2 words for you, Jez. Look, esports, simplistically put, is competitive gaming. But if you want to widen up that definition, it's around essentially individuals and teams of gamers who are participating in organized competitions of all different gamer titles, as you will have heard of, like League of Legends and FIFA and Counter-Strike. And they're either playing online or they're playing in small venues or even purpose-built gaming arenas now. Esports has obviously become a lot more prominent during this pandemic that unfortunately we found ourselves in. And it's quite interesting to see the likes of the NBA and NHL and Premier League all being very active in this space. And I'm sure we'll get into why they're going into esports, around the demographic and the opportunities it presents to engage with that demographic. But you'll see from esports, broadly speaking, that every esport is its own title. So I mentioned a few of the names in the outset, but League of Legends, FIFA, they each have their own ecosystem in which gamers operate. They're operated by the publishers and competitions are put on. Now, the approach of certain publishers varies. Some publishers might use it as a promotional tool, and some might engage in it a lot more and create an ecosystem around it. And each has their own views on how to operate that. So broadly, esports is competitive gaming.
Brilliant. And it could be across any of the titles that are set up into a competition format.
Yes, absolutely. So we've seen FIFA operated on various platforms, or Gfinity used to run the Elite Series. You see that Riot works with a company called DreamHack to put on League of Legends, and you have the LAC, you have the European Championships, you have World Championships, and actually we are trying to, as London United, are trying to qualify for the lowest rung in the UK, which is the UKLC.
Brilliant. And obviously you touched on it firstly there when you talked about the pandemic, and the pandemic has, we read the newspapers, we see the media reports. It's very clear that suddenly there's been this huge interest in esports. And I suppose the question I want to ask is it a good, is the increase good in terms of awareness? Is it, what has this brought up as a pandemic? You've got this interest in esports, and how do you, I suppose, as a business, utilize this kind of growing audience, this growing nature, and this growing awareness? How can that be best utilized by the esports sector?
It's a good question, and I'm going to try and remember the question, because actually I think you need to drill back into gaming, because actually there's a lot of stigma attached to gaming. Gaming is bad for you. You'll hear it described as digital cocaine, which is a term that I like to reference, which I hate to hear. But actually, the perception of gaming being bad and kids sitting on their bottoms for 23 hours of gaming doesn't really exist so much. Yes, there is an addiction element that you might hear referenced by certain MPs, but there's addiction to alcohol, there's addiction to betting. Addiction is in every life part of society. I carry a report around from the Digital Schools House, which shows that when they have done initiatives around esports in schools, there is an educational benefit in event organization, in teamwork, and so on. In fact, I'm trying to look at using FIFA as a tool to promote well-being and literacy, something we might get on to later. So I think, first of all, if you can dispel any myths around gaming and say, look, there are positives that can be brought out of this, we should endorse the fact that isolation shouldn't mean you are self-isolated, that you have this opportunity to connect online with other gamers and be part of a community. and it might have some other benefits, whether it's from a mental health perspective, whether it's from an educational perspective. It should be endorsed and built upon. So I'm not sure if I answered your question. You might need to repeat it, but that was the first train of thought that I had.
No. I like that. It actually, in my mind, it's thrown out a few more questions, because that I think that beautifully dovetails into the fact that what is the age of esports gamers and players? Is there kind of an average age? And it sounds from what you were saying that it's a young audience who are potentially in that vulnerable group while we're in lockdown. So I suppose the idea of COVID-19 and esports actually provides a tool that will help alleviate some of the kind of mental health feelings for youngsters who are kind of trapped indoors in a lockdown, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the average age and demographic is around 13 to 25. Of course, it might be younger, and it's actually older for certain titles. Title like Counter-Strike, where anecdotally, apparently the US military hire the best players in the US. It's got an older demographic. But I think we have to be careful when we're dealing with the minors, of course, and we need to be aware of safeguarding provisions as we engage with them. But certain titles carry a younger age demographic and others older. League of Legends might be slightly older than FIFA or Fortnite, for example.
Cool. And what's that driving force? Because you speak to anyone who's over, I don't know, 35, and they say, "Oh my goodness, I can't imagine that esports is so big, and these people sit there and watch other people game," right? But the truth of the matter is that people do, and I presume some of the factors and some of the reasons for that are that they want to learn how to play the game better themselves. But what do you think is that real kind of not addiction, because that's the wrong word, that real kind of pull and immersiveness of the esports that really captures audiences?
I think the question is, why is it any different to you being glued to the television watching your favorite West Ham or any football? This is the challenge I have with older angel investors, as an example, who don't understand gaming. They say, well, why do people watch people playing FIFA? Well, why do you watch people playing football? It's just a very different mindset. It's the way the demographic has been brought up. You'll appreciate with the convergence of media, the way content is consumed is very different at the 13 to 25 age group to what maybe it is in our age group. You might be very happy to watch a linear TV broadcast, but this demographic wants to consume its content where it can, when it can, how it can, and with whom they can. And I think that is partly what has led to the gaming demographic just engaging far more in content. And esports, they're creating personalities. A lot of these gamers are creating their own personality. They're creating content. Look at Ninja. He's probably one of the best recognized names in the gaming esports demographic. Paris Saint-Germain invite him to the Man United Champions League game for one reason: to endorse the brand PSG with that demographic. And I think the fact that the content's being created and it's short form and it's bite-sized and it's snackable is what the demographic wants, which is why they're engaging with Twitch streams as an example.
Brilliant. And I think it's really important. There's a couple of things I'd love to pull out of there. One was you said earlier about Counter-Strike being used by the US military, which I think is phenomenal and shows you the power of esports. And I think going back to the very start, you mentioned that organisations like the NBA, like FIFA football teams, are really starting to use esports in a positive manner, aren't they? And what sort of things are they doing? From you see these huge franchises. Are they individually trying to create an esports team for each of the football clubs, for each of the basketball teams? How is that starting to evolve, and what does that look like?
I think each rights holder is taking a different approach to esports. If you'd asked them about esports last year, some of them might have said, "What's esports?" Some of them said, "Oh yeah, we've got to do esports." And you say, "Why have you got to do esports?" They're like, "Well, I don't know why I've got to do esports, but I've heard it's this buzzword and I need to do it."
Yes.
This year, they understand what esports is. And with there being no season content, so to speak, certainly on pitch, on track, on field, whichever sport we're talking about, they've realized that they've had to embrace esports. And, celebrities in the US have been investing in esports teams for a long time. People like Mark Cuban, Shaq O'Neal, they've all invested in esports. It's been more of a challenge to get the traditional rights owners of the leagues to engage in esports. But I think, when you ask how are they engaging, they're trying to be a little bit more innovative. one of the things that's always annoyed me, particularly in motorsport, is that they felt they always had to replicate what was happening on the track into an esports environment. And actually, the majority of true purists, motorsport fans, will sit and watch cars going round and round for 20, 30 laps. But actually, the true esports demographic probably want to see a lot shorter, more exciting content. And actually, there's an opportunity to engage a much wider fan base. And Formula One have recognized that. They've now tailored the offering. They're bringing celebrities to drive alongside Lando Norris and others. Lando Norris is on his Twitch stream. He's getting more coverage than he ever did in a traditional race. So everyone's looking at different outlets at which they can utilize esports, but also influencers at the same time. And I think until I got involved in esports, I'd never heard the word influencer and marketing put together so much.
It's really interesting, Ollie, so far in terms of what you've talked about, the kind of allure of esports, what the demographics look like with esports, and the fact that it's not just a young person thing. There are some older people who get involved in esports, and there are older activities. What you often see, and again, this could be media misrepresentation, which is why I think it's important to ask. You often see these young professional esports players look like they're paid very handsomely and not too far behind some of the top paid sports stars around the world, and probably in some areas they're paid more than these top stars. But where does that revenue come from? Is that from salaries? Is it endorsements? Is it sponsorship? Is the first part of the question. And I suppose the second part for me is how difficult is it to become a professional gamer?
Okay, so two parts of the question. I mean, the first around how the players are paid and make their earnings and how to become a professional gamer. I think if I deal with the second part of the question first, becoming a professional gamer isn't easy. Well, that's what we're trying to do. We want to help gamers play a bit more professionally. There's online platforms, but actually, if you were a really good gamer and you didn't know how to create content, and you didn't have a Twitch presence, how are you going to be discovered? So there's lots of challenges, and probably do our own session standalone on that. How are the gamers getting paid? Team orgs have got huge valuations, particularly in the US, and aren't making a lot of money because they're having to pay these salaries to keep the top talent. The talent can make money on prize money, but traditionally you'll find that there's a split of the revenue that they make between the team org and the player. They can bring in their own sponsors, potentially, if they don't conflict with the team org, but the team org is going to be trying to sell sponsorship as well to fund it. I mean, it's no different to a football club in that respect. How does a football club make money? Sponsorship is a huge asset, but they have gate receipts. Esports teams don't have gate receipts. Generally, they're paying, they could be paying 10 million euros to enter the LEC, or even bigger numbers to enter the Overwatch League, and they might get a split of the revenue that way. But they don't have gate receipts, which is ultimately in a P&L is going to make a big difference. So sponsorship, prize money, and then variety of other rev streams that they can try and create are how the orgs make the money, but the players traditionally are just off the salary and prize money.
Wow. So potentially there is potential of a conflict between players and club at different points, I suppose. And does it mean that the players have a bit more, the better the player, the more power you have, in simple terms?
Well, I think the better the player, the more leverage they have. But ultimately, the org is going to ensure that the contract with the player is aligned with everything that they want to do. It's like, I was at the Premier League for many years. If we wanted a club to have autonomy on something, we had to make sure it didn't conflict with any of our central agreements. So there's a lot of parallels with traditional sports and esports and how it operates.
And that's really interesting. You set up London United with the premise of trying to provide that kind of pathway from a grassroots player who has absolutely no idea how they get into esports or become a esports professional, or ultimately, I suppose the other flip of the coin is someone who might not be able to afford a PlayStation or an Xbox, but actually has an amazing skill when they've gone to their friend's house. What are the biggest obstacles in kind of going from grassroots to professional that you've seen so far?
Well, I think the first point is around accessibility, as you've almost referenced, which is why we put on physical events last year. Now with COVID, we've gone to an online model. So the accessibility for a gamer to understand how they can try and take that path to pro is the first hurdle that needs to be overcome. I mean, recognition and just knowing how to stream, as an example, and getting eyeballs and getting awareness is often the challenge, and that's often how players are discovered. So we're trying to almost do it in tandem with, here's your opportunity. You work with London United from an accessibility purpose. We'll try and do physical events as well, particularly in socioeconomically deprived areas like we did in Lewisham last year, so that if you don't have the equipment, but say you are a good gamer, you've got a chance to showcase your skills. And we will work with partners to see if we can get you some equipment. Thrustmasters supported our FIFA tournament with an eSwap controller for our winner. Logitech have helped us in the past as well. So there's brands out there that like this grassroots approach and want to work with an org like us that is aligned on the fact, not just on social purpose, but also will help you in education and nutrition. And do you take caffeine? If so, when do you take caffeine? How much exercise should you be doing? When should you be sleeping? Because actually, if this gamer has a chance to make it pro, the lifespan of his or her career isn't actually very long at all. But the challenge is you've got to get noticed, and we want to do that by obviously hosting tryouts. But before that, we want them to upload content if they're able to. Then we can socialize that and build some recognition for them and build up their profile.
Okay, no, that's really good. And how much untapped great grassroots players do you think? Is there an endless flow, and it's just about making sure you get into the right pockets at the right time? Because I suppose the question I'd love to ask on that is, out of how many people you have trials, so say it's 100 people, how many of those do you think has the potential to make it into the professional ranks?
So we did a FIFA tournament in April, which was to find the best PlayStation 4 gamer to compete against esports teams and football clubs esports players. And we had 80 gamers register. And I have to say the competition was extremely tight up until the final, when the runner-up just absolutely capitulated. And that is quite an important lesson, actually, that operating in this competitive environment is very different for a gamer to that of them playing in the bedroom. It's a bit of a cliche, oh, gamers playing in their bedrooms or front lounge, but it is very different. And that is something that we want to work with gamers to help them and nurture them and develop them. But stage stress testing is going to be an important element if these gamers with the talent want to succeed. As to numbers, I could throw lots of numbers out there. There's 2.2 million gamers in London. If 1% of them wanted to play pro, that's a great addressable market. I think it just depends title by title. We've seen that some titles are more difficult to address. League of Legends community is very tight-knit and created a few issues for us, but we still ran a competition last weekend, and we had 79,000 unique eyeballs and max concurrence of 4,000. So we're obviously creating good content. As to the gamers, until we really embark on a substantive marketing campaign, but the brand is recognizable within the gaming community, we won't know just how many gamers want to take this opportunity. But on the basis of what we've done so far, we can see that there's a demand out there.
Okay, no, which is wonderful, and everything you've said so far, I think the great thing about all of this is, and I'm sure the team at MediaTel will agree, we're all in that media and advertising sector, and the key, I suppose, that keeps the world of advertising going round is the brands and their marketing spend. It feels like there's a real great opportunity from the grassroots to professional path for a brand that's looking at social impact, or a brand that's looking to make an impact within the community. There's kind of like a long-term kind of investment there into making that happen, and almost like you're picking a player, or maybe even a startup in the ad tech world, and you're with it at the start and then helping coach that person up into the professional ranks and then seeing them flourish. I mean, maybe that's just me shooting from the hip, but it sounds like therein lies a real exciting opportunity for brands.
Yeah, I think so. I think we're looking for brands that might not necessarily immediately require the traction of 100,000 engaged users on social media, but actually want to come on a journey and see that we're getting traction on the Twitch stream. We have to convert that into socials. But in fact, that's a challenge for esports brands. I was talking to a very famous footballer's esports team yesterday, and whilst he's got millions of followers on Instagram, he hasn't translated that into Twitter followers. So it's a challenge for everybody. But we want to embrace brands that want to come on a journey. Maybe they're challenger brands. They like our model. They like the grassroots side and social impact, as you say. And actually, the point really is that London is just the first city. It's a very scalable model. So we can start with a clean piece of paper and say to brands, what is it you're interested in? Is it content creation? Is it certain titles? Is it certain cities? And let's work in partnership to cultivate something and really do something authentic and be different and stand up from amongst the crowd.
Yeah, no, I love that. And at the present moment, you're seeing more and more brands who are going public and amplifying their work within the esports world. You know, the likes of Adidas, the likes of BMW. I mean, I saw a fantastic activation, I think it was with the Dota 2 last year, the World Championships in Birmingham, and the DHL robots that they had going in and out of the crowd, delivering food and snacks, which was brilliant. And you think DHL and you think, my God, what does that have to do with esports?
I think the fans were chanting DHL at the ESL One arena.
Yes, which is unbelievable, isn't it? And you just think, my goodness. But what brands do you think are getting it right besides DHL, and why do you think they're getting it right? And also, without destroying your business, there must be some brands you've seen that have got it completely wrong. You don't have to name them, but you could perhaps give us what sector they're in.
I think the brands that are doing things right, immediately spring to mind. The people like Ben and Jerry's, who work with Fnatic in Italy, BMW, who worked with Cloud9, have now done this multi-organization partnership across 5 esports orgs, to try and really complement the full offering. Coca-Cola have worked with Riot, Mountain Dew have worked with ESL. You've seen the car manufacturers come in. Some have done it better than others, is what I would say in answer to your second question. And you can do a little bit of digging to work out who hasn't done it well. Red Bull have been involved. Obviously, you mentioned Adidas. I think that all these brands have come in and they have had a degree of authenticity. And authenticity is a word that's used probably far too often in esports, but actually it's probably one of the most important words from my perspective when I talk to a brand, because you don't want to just do the same old. You don't want to just take money to plaster a logo on a top, because it's just transparent to your community. So if you try and create something that's authentic, the esports demographic is very loyal and digitally savvy, as you know, and it can take you a lot further. So I'm hoping that has answered your question, Jez, and be trying to be a little bit diplomatic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's my job to try and push you to be a bit not controversial, but thought-provoking, I think is the right term in that space. But I suppose the interesting thing is as well, you always presume in that community the last thing they want, like you say, is things being badged, logos being placed there, interruptions in their game. But then saying that, you get some really amazing stuff like the interruption with the DJ Marshmello gig during Super Bowl, the Travis Scott interaction in Fortnite as well. What is it, do you think, that the gamers themselves or the esports professionals and the audience, how do they want to see brand activations? Do they want to see a real kind of immersive piece, something that's a bit unique, or is it just simply they want to have something that adds to the value of the game they're playing or competing in?
In the interest of time, because I'm being told we've run over, I would say that they want. I would say they want to see it as authentic and relevant.
Okay, wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Oliver. I know I'm terrible and I often go over, but if you do have any questions for us, probably not me, but probably for Ollie, you can find his Twitter handle across all of the information that MediaTel has around the event. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. I would normally at this point say Oliver will be staying around for the drinks afterwards, but he will be in a virtual sense. So if you want to share a drink or an esports story with him, please do so via the wonderful of Twitter. Now, I'd like to join you, giving you a round of applause for Ollie.
Thanks very much, Jez. Thank you.
Thank you.